it's Amber Lee Forrester, and we're back for another episode of Masters and Mentors. And today I have Mr. Garvin Forrester. Notice the similarity in the last name. Yes, this is my husband, and he is an aerospace engineer, a serial entrepreneur, and pretty fascinating. So I wanted to take some time to talk to him about his journey today. So this is a special edition. Welcome, Garvin.
Thank you.
All right. So, Garvin, I think that I've always been fascinated by, one, the fact that an aerospace engineer is a rocket scientist.
Yes.
And people always say funny stuff like, oh, it's not rocket science, or, oh, he's not a rocket scientist. And our daughter has a joke. She always likes to say, well, my dad is. That's like her gentle flex.
Right.
But let's just start with you as a child and what inspired you to look into the field of aerospace engineering.
Right. So yeah, I am literally a rocket scientist. But as a kid, I actually wanted to be a pilot. I used to stick my arms out of my dad's car and, pretend I was flying. So everybody thought I would be a pilot. So strange evolution. Aerospace engineering was not on the top of my mind. My parents were also serial entrepreneurs. And I guess the question comes, is it a learned behavior, or is it just something that's endangered you to become a serial entrepreneur? So I saw them do everything. My dad had a business selling bottled soda. That was new to the Caribbean, because I grew up in the Caribbean, so that was new to the Caribbean. But when I got ready to go off to college, my only question was, what was the hardest subject I can do? So when I got there, though, they put me into computer science. And I was like, no, this is not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do aerospace engineering because everybody said it was the hardest subject to do. So I took it as a challenge, but I always knew that being an engineer was not my calling. I wanted to take engineering and make a business out of it. I always just knew I had a business mind, and I've kind of manifested my path. I mean, from day one, it's like, okay, fine, I want to be a consultant. I want to help other engineering companies, work on their aircraft. And sooner than later, I left my typical engineering job and started my own company.
Okay, let's not get too far ahead now. But since you are listening and you're hearing some of the path, I think one of the most fascinating things about Garvin is that he went from this space of being an engineer and thinking one way into being an entrepreneur. And we're going to talk about that journey, but I want to rewind us back. I'm pretty fascinated by the fact that you wanted to tackle the hardest subject in college. I don't think that there are a lot of college students who go, I want to go do the hardest thing that they have. What was it in you that sought out something so challenging? What did that mean for you?
I've just always wanted to challenge myself. I actually wanted to be in sports, actually. So I was a decent basketball player, so I always challenged myself there. I'm pleased that I have that character trait, but it's just always been a challenge for me. What's the next challenge? So I guess just by nature, being an entrepreneur is about that challenge, right? You also have to be a little bit crazy, but it's also the next challenge in your business journey. So I think that's what's always driven me.
Why are you trying to skip past the aerospace engineer? He keeps trying to get to the entrepreneurship part. I'm not there yet. We're still in college. Take it on back to Syracuse University, your undergrad and your master's degree there.
Yeah.
What is it like when you're in school for aerospace engineering? Is it very challenging? And maybe how did your life differ from your friends who may have majored in less demanding curriculums and majors?
Well, for me, fortunately, at the time, there was actually quite a few Black engineers coming up at the time.
I love to hear it.
Yeah, we actually had a Black society of engineers.
At Syracuse?
At Syracuse. So we had a little meeting place, and there were kids that came up from inner cities, Bronx, Queens, so they still had an inner city mentality, even though they were trying to be engineers. So we weren't like the geeks stuck in the lab, like some of the others. We actually convened and hung out and helped each other, through our classes. Like one of the most things we did is like the folks that graduated before us, they would leave us back all their tests, all their exams. And the one thing about college you may learn is that do the same exams over and over again. So we're able to get, good grades. And
So you got a leg up because you knew what was on the exam, but you still had to remember what was on the
Oh,
exam.
the workload was intense.
Tell us about that.
It's hard. I mean, you've got varying calculus classes, physics classes. You've got labs. You've got professors that worked in industry before, so they're very demanding. So I mean, yes, it's a demanding curriculum. Early classes, 8 a.m. So yeah, you've got to have an affinity for it. But engineering is pretty structured based. So if you've got a good thought process, you can probably work your way through it.
And what does that mean? A good thought process?
As long as you're able to solve problems methodically, use reasonable assumptions. As you learn in physics, there are a lot of assumptions that they make to make problems easier. So as long as you've got a mindset that appeals that way, the engineering principles should be able to come to you easier.
So masters and mentors, a lot of the reason that we do this is for the youth. So if there's a young adult who's listening and they are inspired by your story, what advice do you have for them to prepare to go to school for such a challenging major like aerospace engineering?
I mean, I'm sure you hear this all the time, but fundamentals. If you know your fundamentals in mathematics and physics, you shouldn't have a problem because you can use those fundamentals to build. They're almost like building blocks for the other problems. So if you're a good math-based student, a good science-based student, and you're firm in your fundamentals, you can understand how the other blocks pile on top of each other.
And what strengths and skills did you have to develop to sustain and continue, not just in college, but even after school, in entering into the industry of aerospace?
So that's a good question. So strangely enough, the first thing that I learned is that everything that you learn once you get into industry is kind of thrown out the window, especially with the larger companies. They pretty much give you a handbook on what their procedures are, how they calculate things. So you almost become like a spreadsheet processing engineer. So you strangely quickly learn that I went to school for all of this stuff and I understand the fundamentals. But if I'm in a large company, I'm just following their basis and their rules on how they design. If it's a product-based company, like an aircraft company, you follow their process. And I think that's one of the things that quickly made me decide I didn't want to be just an engineer.
Yeah. Now, one of the stories that I've heard you tell is about your internships and the work that you did in the summers while you were in school. Can one work while you're getting a degree in aerospace engineering? And if so, what does that look like? And will you share with us just a bit about the type of work that you did while you were in school?
Yeah, so yes, you can work. So when I went to school, there were co-op programs. You can either work on campus, but those were campus-based jobs, right? Like working in the dining hall or something like that. But if you really wanted to get experience, you'd only have time to do that in the summer. Most engineers do not take summer classes because they usually don't offer many engineering summer classes, strangely enough.
Because nobody wants to do aerospace engineering in the summer. In Syracuse, especially, it's the only warm months you get.
It's surprisingly hot in that time of year. So actually, my first internship, which my dad told me just do, he's like, tell them you'll work for free. Like he literally told me work for free, and I went there and told them, look, I'm willing to work for free. And they're like, no, we're not gonna not pay you. But they were so enamored that I came to them like that way that I was making like an engineering salary. And I ended up working for a company called Cobite Billing. I'll never forget this. So they did the billing. You remember when we had actual land phones? They did the billing report for AT&T, like how many minutes you spent on each call. And they were developing the first e-commerce system, the first database system to like, so you could put clothing and everything else. I was able to actually program a lot of that stuff way before we even knew e-commerce was going to be a thing.
This is one of the fascinating things about engineering. Many of these fields that have details that people dig into and do for a living that are so minute that you would never think that like companies get paid millions of dollars to do that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty fascinating. So you worked for free.
Yeah, but I mean, they ended up paying me
They ended up
a
paying. Oh,
a
right. You
good
said you had a
salary.
salary. So
Yeah,
you work, you got your salary. So
yeah.
this is in school. So let's fast forward to after your graduation.
Hmm.
What did it look like for you as a recent grad? You got your master's degree and you're out looking for a job. Will you share a bit about your journey
Hmm.
after school
Right,
before you became the
right.
business owner? Because I know you want to get back to that entrepreneurship, but we're getting
Right,
there.
right.
Okay.
So for me personally, it was actually a little bit challenging because I came from another country. Um, and I'm in a sector that's really heavily military based. So they kind of tended to want you to be either a citizen or have a lot of security clearance. So I was neither. So it was a little bit challenging. So, there was the period there wondering, if you'd actually get a job. But I went on quite a few I mean, not engineers, sorry, a few interviews, some of the large aerospace companies, but usually hit the wall with not being a citizen. But then finally, I got an offer from Boeing, um, and I was able to start out there. Um, yeah, and I mean, once again, that kind of started my journey again into the
To get into
entrepreneur.
entrepreneurship. And
Yeah,
what was your position at Boeing?
I was just engineer. It was just technical engineer.
Technical engineer.
Yeah,
Okay, for an aerospace company. That's how
yeah,
the aerospace comes into play.
yeah. I mean, one of the largest aircraft manufacturers
Yeah,
in the world.
of course. No,
Yeah.
I've never heard of Boeing.
Nah,
Sorry, no.
no.
All right, so drum roll. Now
Mm,
we get into you're starting to become inspired to become an engineer. So you're
right,
at Boeing,
right.
and you meet Ross, your partner. Will you
Hmm.
tell us just a bit about how you went from working at Boeing to then branching off and starting your own company with your partner?
Sure. So the one thing in particular about aerospace companies, they're very cyclic. It's a 5-year design program for a new aircraft. So every 5 years, there's this huge layoff of engineers. So I started in a period when there was about to be a layoff. So myself and my boss at the time, we were kind of stuck in this layoff period. But he decided that, he just wasn't going to wait for them to lay them off. It's like, well, let's go start our own company. His family was not too far from Syracuse where I went to school. So he was eager to go back, bring his kids to his grandparents and everything else. So he took me along with him. And strangely enough, not too long after that, Bowen reached out to us and asked us if we would help them sell some of their intellectual property. So we would take their software, commercialize it, and sell it as if it was our product, but pay them a royalty.
And this is hence the start of Calmar Research?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So let's talk a bit about Calmar Holdings and Calmar Research
Hmm.
and what the thinking was in forming the company and the strategy in it
Hmm.
as well.
So, as I mentioned, I manifested quite a few things in my life. I knew I didn't want to be a straight and narrow engineer. I actually wanted to be a consultant, but I did realize I had no credibility coming straight from college to go consult with some of these major aerospace companies. Um, but having the Bowen moniker behind us allowed us to enter some of these doors that we normally wouldn't be able to, and then hence gave us credentials that we would have maybe taken decades to achieve. So we started not only selling the software, but we were able to go in and consult with those companies, and then I just started living my dream from that standpoint. But then again, I got the bug that says, okay, that is fine, but I also want to develop. I want to create something. I'm still selling somebody else's product in essence. Even though I'm selling my consultant skill, I still want to develop something from the ground up. And my partner Ross has a similar spirit. Um, so then we formed a holdings company where we can just generate ideas. And then Calmar Research just became an idea generator. Anything that stuck on the wall, we was like, okay, let's see if we can go do it. And
And the
yeah,
structure is best for that is a holdings company. And then
yeah,
these other arms that come beneath the holdings company.
absolutely. Because you develop, what's called IP, intellectual property. The best place is just put that in its own entity. Um, and then leverage it as you get opportunities.
Yeah.
Sometimes they sit there for a while, but sometimes they manifest or something.
So I find this really interesting as well, that if you were wondering where he's from, because he mentioned he's from another country, Garvin is from Grenada.
Hmm.
And I find that sometimes it takes a lack of something to recognize the value in something else. I can imagine that they did not have a lot of aerospace engineers or a lot of traffic smart companies
Right,
in Grenada.
right.
So tell us just a bit about these ideas that came to you for the business and what some of your core products were in Icone Products and Calmar Research.
So good question. So in Calmar, we had the Bowen software, but we also developed a highly insulated concrete block. One of my partners wanted to make more efficient buildings way before folks were even talking about that. So he had an idea for an insulated concrete block. And we went to, Calmar was formed in New York State. So we went to New York State and got a grant. We described to them why it would be beneficial to have an insulated block to save energy. And we got a grant for it. We also did designs for automotive companies, so not just aircraft, and got involved in NASCAR because cars naturally need to be aerodynamic to move as fast as they possibly can. So we got into NASCAR, and then we got into a field called telematics, which is getting all the data off of vehicles to help improve their, the economies. And then that got us into traffic, and then that got us into construction and work zone, which got us into that new company that you're mentioning, which is Icone Products, which is in an industry called smart work zone technology. Yeah.
So I think there's some key lessons, and I just want to take a moment to point them out here. You went to school to be challenged.
Mm-hmm.
And you thought that your path would be aerospace engineer, but what I think is really honorable about your journey is that you allowed some flexibility for that to mold into what it would become and to continue molding, because you're still pivoting today, which we'll talk about in a bit in some of your newer ventures.
Mm-hmm.
Yet that flexibility, they say flexibility is a great part of mental health. I think flexibility is also a great part of success.
Mm.
One of the most challenging things that I can imagine happened to you was the economic downturn in 2008, when all of the companies had to stop having private jets and their executives on private jets. And I know private jet industry was a big business for you guys. So will you just talk for a bit about, think back to that moment. And I'm not talking about a high level answer. I want you to put yourself back in a conversation with your partner, Ross, or any of the guys at that time. And you are probably losing it, like, oh my God, what is happening with the economy? Like we all are, and trying to decide what's next.
Right.
What was your frame of mind around that? And how did you decide to pivot in the way that you did?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's an excellent question because, yeah, that turn, especially in the business jet world, really affected us because we sold a lot of software to the smaller aerospace companies, which primarily design business jets. So that definitely took away our market. So yes, along that road, we definitely had conversations on, how do we pivot? Do we start developing new technology? I mean, that takes a lot of investment, so it's not necessarily the best thing to do at the time. So actually, what we decided to do was we actually buckled down and hired some more engineers, and then focused on going after some of the larger aerospace companies to try to provide consulting and software to them. And we were able to land like companies like Embraer and Lockheed Martin. Like I spent a lot of time developing a specific tool for Lockheed with help from NASA, because the NASA tool was just really, really experimental and hard to use. So I just made it a lot easier to use. And along that pivot, we just continue to look at other venues. And that's when the Icone company started coming to fruition. Because while we were doing that, New York State reached out to us and was asked if we can help them develop a real-time traffic monitor. It was like, sure, but why? But they're like, because we have no idea what we're causing when we do construction on the highways. We don't know if we're backing traffic up. We don't know where it's happening. So we went down that road and then quickly learned that there was a whole market in the smart work zone industry.
Yeah. And it took
Pivot
you
there.
kind of far away from the aerospace industry that you
Yeah,
started in.
very far.
In your opinion, what is the state of the aerospace industry today?
Hmm.
And what advice would you have for someone who may still be seeking to become a part of it, who may still want to be an aerospace engineer now in 2022, going on 2023?
Yeah, so aircraft manufacturing is probably one of the most interesting product lines. It's very integrated. It's literally from nuts to bolts. There's a process in the entire design, and you always come up with new aircraft because there's always new technology. And then the military side of it is very interesting because the government is always funding, military applications. So aerospace is probably one of the most resilient markets you can get into.
People always got to fly. They got to move
Yeah,
around somewhere.
yeah. So there may be downturns, but there's always airlines. There's always people going somewhere. There's unfortunately always a military application.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So that continues.
yeah.
But now you have pivoted into this new space, which started with a pivot into the traffic safety and wireless vehicles. I'm sorry.
No,
I'm
you're
saying
right. Like
correctly.
autonomous.
Autonomous
Yeah.
vehicles. And then you went beyond that and started to venture into other industries. And you have found yourself in this circle of people in the music industry and sports and entertainment industries. And you have become a very valuable asset for them. How did that happen? What were your transferable skills that you took from your previous career into this new space that you're in?
So I think that's the serial entrepreneur part of
Oh,
me.
he's excited. I
get to talk about that.
Right.
So I believe in the generality of business. I believe that you can apply the same skill sets no matter if it's a business you've never thought of before, never seen before, or something that you're really familiar with. There's some core principles on the projection of where a business is going. And then there's a core principle of some of the pitfalls and hardships that you would see forming a business.
Now, I'm not going to let you mansplain. Give me some of those core principles.
Along the path of any new business, there's funding challenges, especially for small businesses, especially for minority businesses. It's hard to get that initial funding. And unless your friends and family are well-to-do, you're going to stumble along the way. It's key, and this is probably one of my biggest bits of advice for anybody, even if you're starting your own business. Get a team of other serial entrepreneurs that have already had successful businesses and make them your advisors, because they will help you overcome those challenges.
I think that's really great advice. Don't just start from scratch, which is a part of the reason why business coaching has become more popular. You get people who are experts who can consult and help you to not make some of the same mistakes that they made along the way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, but advisory board, another way of doing this, getting them on your team in one way or the other,
right,
so that you can access their wisdom and not make the same mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah. Get them from your community, get them from your friend circle, get them from, your dad's close friend has a business. And that's kind of how I pivoted into these other sectors, into entertainment and back into sports. Ultimately, people came to me to ask, how can you help me with my business?
Yeah.
And then
your answer was?
Yeah, I love to. One of my passions is to help small businesses grow. And in particular, I've got a passion to help Black wealth. But along that way, I realized that I can't help anyone until I've got myself established.
Yeah.
So my path has been getting myself established so I can go help other companies. And I found that going in and helping other people start their businesses or help them along their businesses is giving me more access. So one day I can, help other people.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I know you're passionate about that.
Yeah.
So I love to say that you put the business in music business. You had a lot of these music industry guys coming to you, and there was something with all due respect, that they were lacking, and you
Hmm.
filled that space. What was that?
What I've heard over and over again is actually my demeanor. I process stuff before I speak, is what a lot of folks tell me. Um, and I guess in a lot of these industries, it's really fast paced and it's really a lot of people try to get over on other people. So a lot of people develop thick skin. So a lot of people that come to me are looking for someone that can kind of navigate through that. And having my aerospace background, like it or not, gives me a leg up in most of the boardrooms. Um, so they appreciated that about me and wanted me on their side because now I can give them an extra advantage.
Yeah.
So I've had managers ask me to manage them and other folks with their business just asking me to bring my network of contacts just to help them, project their business to the next level.
You have made almost like a 180. You go from aerospace engineering into entertainment. Yet
Hmm.
you're still in aerospace and you're still, or not aerospace, but you're
Well,
still in your company,
still in
Calmar,
engineering, yeah,
and still in engineering.
yeah.
Yet you're in this other space. So, what advice would you have to someone who is in a space and maybe not quite fulfilled?
Mm.
Actually, that's one, I should not make that assumption.
Mm.
I should ask, was
Mm.
there, so let's start there. What was missing in your career that led you to explore the space that was so far from where your experience lied?
So that's an excellent question. Um,
He likes my question.
and I hope it's just my character drive, but um, I can sense when I've accomplished um, a certain goal. So even in my engineering company, I feel like I've attained um, where I can go. And the best advice I got from a CEO of Boeing was you should constantly be looking to get replaced. He's like, if you're not getting replaced, you're not going anywhere. So he was talking literally, he's like, okay, fine. If you're the VP, you want somebody to come and take that job from you because now you'll be the president. Take somebody else, take that job from you, now you're the CEO. So I just applied that to business in general. If I'm not completely either replacing myself or taking on a new challenge, then I'm stagnant. Um, like I said, I always wanted to play sports, and in college, I went to school in the '90s, so there was a lot of battle rapping and stuff. So entertainment and stuff seemed like a natural fit.
Did
And
you ever think you find yourself in this space?
no, 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 honestly, no, no, honestly, no, really, honestly, no, no, I didn't. No, but it's refreshing. And it's from a business standpoint, it's just like any other business, and that was refreshing to me because it helped me along my mindset that kind of told me no matter what the business is, you can apply certain fundamentals,
There's always those transferable skills,
exactly,
and to
determine the
identify
projection.
what those are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
determine the projection, skip out on the pitfalls, and then most businesses just become pretty contained.
So that leads me to my final question for you, and that is around, this is what I was alluding to earlier. If if there is someone, if there's a viewer out there who is watching and listening and saying, I'm in this space and I've dedicated years of education and experience to it, but I think I'm looking for something else.
Mm.
What would your advice be to that person?
Ah, another good question, and I know you're particularly
Ding, 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 ding.
I know you're particularly skilled in answering those questions. Just make sure it's your passion and question what your motivation is for it. Um, yeah, I wanted to go do the hardest thing in college, but I never looked at it from a monetary standpoint. It wasn't like I was like, I want to go do the thing that paid me the most money. If that's your driving force, I think you would probably just end up always working for somebody else. If you want to do something that you believe in, the money always comes. One of my oldest partners have always said that. He's like, if you enjoy what you're doing, the money will come, and it's the truest thing. So just ensure what your motivation is, Make sure it's a passion, and absolutely surround yourself with folks that have done it before. And the moment you think that you're above those folks, surround yourself again with a new group of folks that have done it before. And you'll always be on the right trajectory.
I love it. It's not rocket science, or maybe it is. Thank you, Garvin, for sitting down and talking with us. I think it's fascinating to hear your story, and not just the story of an aerospace engineer, but the story of an aerospace engineer who didn't lock himself into a box, no matter how fancy or admired that box was, and that you've continued to allow yourself to evolve, and you're in a new space now that seems very fitting for you, even though it's not somewhere that you expect it to be.
Yeah,
So I hope
very
that your
true.
story has inspired people. I hope that you guys enjoyed listening out for it. If you want to check out his companies, Calmar
Calmar
Holdings,
Research, yeah. And Calmar
calmarresearch.com.
Holdings, yeah.
Yeah.
And iconeproducts.com.
And he's no IGG, so you will not find him there. But you can find him on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Thank you guys for watching another episode of Masters and Mentors. We hope to continue to inspire you and expose you to different professions and careers so that you know that you are not limited. The sky is the only limit that we have. And that's not even it, especially when you're an aerospace engineer. All right, guys, have a great one. Thanks so much.